Well, we're going to get our webinar started this evening. I want to welcome you, all of our guests who have joined us tonight for this webinar about getting your church more focused and involved in missions. My name is Tim Cole, and I'm the Executive Director of Waypoint, and we provide these monthly 55-minute webinars to equip leaders in the church to get on mission and stay on mission. Twice a year, we do that for people that are missions interested, that are providing some kind of missions leadership at your church. And we're trying to help you make the transition as best you're able, moving away from just being a church that writes checks to missionaries and doesn't have the opportunity to do much more with them, to being a church that is really involved in making an impact around the globe. And so we have the luxury of inviting people to our webinars each month that provide great perspective outside of the local church to provide some training and equipping for us in whatever topic that we're doing. And so we're very thankful that we've got Dr. James Norrid tonight from Next Generation for Christ Ministries, based out of Fairfax, Virginia, which is here in the Old Dominion. And so he's relatively local, and so we're glad to have him on board. But before we do that, as always, we want to thank Mid-Atlantic Christian University, our ministry partner that sponsors our webinar platform every month. And we're thankful for their partnership since we began this webinar series more than 2 years ago. I do want to tell you, because you're missions interested people, by being on this webinar tonight, that Waypoint is having the honor and privilege of hosting the International Conference on Missions in 2 years, in 2021. In Richmond, Virginia. This year it's in Kansas City. I believe it's in Cincinnati next year, but they're coming back to Richmond in 2 years in the middle of November. And so if you'd have that in the back of your mind, that would be great. We would love for you to come and join a great gathering of missions interested people and missions organizations and missionaries. We hosted in 2015, 4 years ago, had over 6,500 people from around the country and around the region in particular come to that 3-day missions gathering in Richmond. So we'd love to have you be a part of that. And I'm going to share one slide very quickly, and then we're going to move into our time. Let's see where that is, right here. As a part of hosting the International Conference on Missions, we are inviting churches in the region to help us plant 21 churches in 21. And what we mean by that is we're going to give, as a result of this campaign, give big checks on stage to 5 organizations that are going to plant 21 churches as a result of this campaign, where churches around our region get to do something together that will last longer than the convention. And so at the bottom of this slide, you can see here the URL 21in21campaign.com that provides some frequently asked questions and a video that explains what we're trying to do. And we would love for your church to be part of this campaign. We're trying to raise $500,000 for this campaign that'll help us pay for our commitment to host the convention, and then all the rest, which is the majority of it, will go to plant these 21 churches. And so we are more than halfway there. Our commitments so far are well over $300,000, but the last 150 is going to be way harder to raise than the first 300. And so if your church would be interested in that, if you would check out that that website, and if you would contact me about any questions you would have about making a commitment from your church, a pledge to set aside some special funds so that your church could help plant 21 churches in different places around the globe, Eastern Europe and in Central Asia and Africa and in Mexico, and then an immigrant church here in the Mid-Atlantic region. So we hope you'll join that. But I'm going to stop share right now. And we want to welcome Dr. James Norrid to our webinar tonight. We're thankful that you've joined us, and I just want to give you all the time. You've got the screen to just share with us from your perspective some great teaching and tips for how our churches can really move the needle in church involvement in missions. So thanks, James, for joining us tonight.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tim. And I'm so blessed and honored to be here with you all this evening. So thankful for Waypoint Church Partners and the great work and ministry that they do, so supportive of missions and church planting, and for all of you for your interest in missions, whether you're a local minister, a preaching pastor, elder, whoever you may be, a committed church member, thank you for your heart for this ministry and for missions. My name is James Nord. I've served as a local preaching minister for many years and blessed and honored to do that. I always had a heart for mission, and I grew up going on mission trips across Europe with a ministry that helps people practice their English using the Bible as a textbook. And so that was something that helped me gain a real heart for missions. And then a few years ago, we launched full-time our ministry, Next Generation for Christ. And I'll try to put that up here. So, and we're talking tonight about expanding your church's focus, involvement, and support for mission. So for our ministry, about half of the ministry is overseas and about half of it is here in the U.S. And there is kind of a real blending between those. And our mission is quite simply to share Jesus and to reach the next generation for Christ here and around the world. And as we talk about this tonight, I want to give some practical tips, tools, resources for you, some stories which hopefully can help you catch a vision for this, and some real practical things that will hopefully be of help to you in your role in promoting missions at your church. And I also want to talk about this kind of blending between the overseas and the local, because they can feed into one another and really build a great synergy. And to do that, I'll start with sharing a story about my daughter and how we went to Israel. One of our works is in the wonderful land of Israel, the Holy Land. Let me try to bring this back up here. And we have a film series I'll tell you a little bit about that helps share the gospel. And this film series is something that has a lot of different languages, and we have it in Arabic as well. And so we were there at a camp, and we were going through the film series, telling people the story of Jesus Christ, and it is in Arabic. And so you never know if you're using a translator and you've got kind of some younger people, just exactly how much they are getting of what you're sharing with them. And so, but there's this young girl there named Angelina. She's right there in the front in the pink there. That's my oldest daughter in the middle. And Angelina was so intense. She's 8 years old. But again, we're like, how much is she getting of this? So at the end of the camp session, her parents come, and her parents, they weren't fully Christians, but they were seekers. They were open. And so they came to the camp and at the end, and her mother came up and said, you know what, my daughter just loved this. She talked about this every single night, how much it touched her heart and the people. And she said she loved the videos and wanted to watch them all. And then she said, and she will probably talk about this for the rest of her life. Of course, that's anytime you just impact one person, you know, I mean, it just warms the heart. And so later in that year, my daughter, Gina, was at school, and she had written an essay on how there's this God-shaped void in all of our hearts. All of us are lonely, and we have this God-shaped void in our hearts that only God can fill. Now, in Northern Virginia, you're not exactly encouraged to write about God and do those kind of things, but our kids go on a lot of mission trips. Of course, we try to teach them all this. And there was this girl that was from India that was there in her class. And she came up to Gina afterwards, and she said to her, she said, tell me more about this God that you talk about and that you worship. And of course, if you know anything about India, you know that they worship a lot of different gods. And so she's not most likely going to be a believer. And so she shared with her about God and Christ. And so after that, she turned to leave, my daughter did. And she felt this prompting from God that she needed to say more. So she turned around, hoping this girl was still there. And she was just kind of standing there in the hallway waiting. And so my daughter invited her to go and do the service project together. And as they were talking, she asked where she was from. She'd been there in the U.S. about 6 weeks, from India. And she said, what street did you move into? She said, I moved on Doolittle Lane. And my daughter said, Doolittle on what? And she said, Doolittle and Unicorn. And Gina said, Doolittle and Unicorn. She said, That's my street. And she had moved in 2 doors down from us. And my wife, when the other family moved out, had prayed that God would send someone our way that we could share the gospel with and to tell them about Jesus Christ. And my daughter, when she had this encounter with this girl, she burst inside the door of our house and she said, "You won't believe what happened." Wouldn't it be great if an entire church were filled with people who are passionate about sharing Jesus Christ with others, who are equipped and trained from oldest to young to share Christ with others, and who wanted to be a part of the church's mission efforts to reach Jesus? I'm here to tell you that this can be done. It may be hard to get everyone on board, but with some of the things we're going to talk about, there's some practical tools and ways that you can blend what you're doing in your church and gather greater support and do a lot more for Jesus Christ with prayer and many other things. So I want to go through and share with you some various aspects of growing your church's mission and their mission efforts. And I'll do a share screen on this again. A little bit about our work in ministry. So we've got different works around the world. God has opened up doors in all over the world, which has been incredible to see. And we have at least one work in each of the major regions of the country. So of course, I'm based here in the U.S. and do a number of work with churches here, and then go around the world to different places to seek to equip other churches to share the gospel. And so we have work in, let's see, bring this up. Okay. In North America, we've got in South America, I work in Peru. In Western, Central, Southeastern Europe, we have Croatia. Eastern Europe, Russia and Belarus, a little bit in Ukraine. In Africa, Kenya. In Asia, India and Singapore. And then Middle East, which Israel is technically Asia, but no one thinks of it as that. So list that separately, work there in Israel. And there's a lot of different places, but I'm going to share with you some things in which there are some commonalities in those works that really help draw them together and help get others involved and on board with that. Of course, locally, these are stats that stand out to me. Just the decline in Christianity in the U.S. Some 35% of millennials have no faith affiliation, 17% weekly church attendance. That's all there is in the U.S. And so many churches are facing declining membership, declining budgets. And so there's a lot of things that are difficult on that on a lot of sides. But there's also within this younger generation a real heart for making a difference in the world, an interest in things that are global. I mean, the further off we go, if we say, we've got people interested in Nepal, then they're interested in that. In fact, I was sharing that at a church, a local church here the other day, and someone was in the audience, at the church from Nepal. So they they came up to me afterwards. But let's talk a little bit about expanding your church's focus on mission. And to do this, I also want to both expand as well as perhaps narrow a bit, or at least have a filter based upon a strategy that I will share with you that you can use to evaluate some of your mission efforts, to paint a vision, as well as try to make them more effective, which obviously effective missions that are reaching people for Christ, obviously those are things that people want to get on board and be a part of. So there are several forms of the Great Commission. Acts chapter 1, verse 8, one of those, Jesus says to his disciples after the resurrection, "You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." So if you look at that, I mean, it seems pretty clear that Jesus and God care, they care about reaching all peoples, right? And so we want to reach people in our neighborhood, we want to reach people around the world, and we want to share Christ overseas. And the great thing about today's mission efforts is that now the world is in many ways getting smaller, right? With the internet, with global information and access, with ease of transportation, online, all of these worlds are converging. And if you live in a place like DC and this greater area, I mean, we have people from all around the world just on our street. I mean, in our neighborhood, and we live, you know, in a nice middle class type of neighborhood that could be in middle America in some ways, but there's people from all kinds of places. In fact, probably Indian is the strongest or the most strongly represented group in my youngest child's school, and then Asian and everywhere else. So you've got mission opportunities all around you, but those also can provide connection points for overseas as well. And let me share with you this strategy that you can use to look at your mission efforts and hopefully gain some greater support. So when we talk about being sent out into the world, Jesus, of course, is the model for our mission efforts. And we see this most directly in the version of the Great Commission that's found in John chapter 20, verse 21, where Jesus says, as the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. So that's about as clear as you can get, that Jesus is our model for mission. Just as Christ was sent into the world, we've been sent into the world. And this is that missional concept that is found. If you've read Missional Church, it's kind of a seminal theological work saying, hey, you know what, here in North America, we need to do what we've been doing overseas, and that is really that the church is fundamentally about mission, and we need to focus all of our efforts to make sure and look at through that lens. And if you look at most everything that we do as a people, you know, it's because of the nature and character of God. And this is something important to remind your people about. This will help with motivation for why they should do this. Why is it that we're to be loving? It's because God is what? A loving God. He loved us first. God says, be holy. Why? Because what? I am holy. And so why is it that we should be a church, a people that is fundamentally about mission? Not something that we just do once a year or that we just write a check to, but that all of our efforts are looked at through that lens, and that we are constantly on mission as God's people. It's because God is fundamentally a sending God, an sent God. He sends Christ into the world. He sends the Spirit, and we have been sent as well. And so, for people who have a background in the Restoration movement, I mean, one of our strengths is going back to Scripture, right? And this is thoroughly biblical. And so this is, again, another way to connect with people. And we must remember that when we look at making disciples, Jesus, when he gives that great commission in Matthew 28 to go and make disciples, sometimes we forget to go back to other parts in Matthew and see what he said. And we see that when he originally called the disciples, he said, follow me and I will do what? I will send you out to fish for people. So he didn't say, come follow me and make you great Bible students, or I'll make you great worshipers. Those are all important. But it's fundamentally about being a people that are on mission, that we are also calling others to go and make disciples. So that means, I mean, if you talk about budget, focus, meeting, all these things, when you start looking at this through this biblical theological lens of mission, it really can change a church. And so then once we have that focus, let's look at a strategy that is something that hopefully can resonate with people who have this background in going back to Scripture. So we look at and teach a three-part mission strategy, which every place is contextual. You can be contextualized, but we found it's pretty universal. And I would say, I think it's not because we came up with it, because it's what Jesus said he came to do. So first of all, Jesus said he came to seek and save the lost, right? So this is not something that just happens once a year. Like the fall program, like, or the budget that we send out, but a constant thing that we are people who are involved in mission. Jesus said that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to do what? To serve others. And so service is fundamental important in reaching people for Christ. And then Jesus said that he came to proclaim, or going with the S's, share the good news. That's why I was sent. And I work with churches and I ask them, okay, which of these three maybe are you doing well, and what have you maybe missing, not hitting quite fully on all four cylinders, or all three cylinders? And most of them will say that they're doing some kind of service thing, but they're really missing out maybe on the seeking, which is actively looking, heart, ministry, etc., or they're missing out on the share. Now, this happens locally, but this is also with many mission efforts as well. And if a church is not looking through these lenses, You know, you might have a ministry that's doing some good work, some good deeds, which is fantastic, but because they don't have a method for sharing Christ with people, they may not ultimately be very effective in reaching people. And so helping churches walk through this mission strategy is tremendously important. And it can also give you a lens from which to evaluate what works to support. Because I just asked this, was Jesus a pretty good missionary? I say he's probably pretty good, you know, one of the best. And so every time you see Jesus reaching out, what is he doing? He is blessing people, healing people, ministering to people, and then also proclaiming this message about the kingdom of God. And so for us on the share part, there's a lot of different things involved in that, and we do seminars around all those seek, serve, share. But we found a really helpful way to share the gospel today is to go through the biblical story. And we have a film series called The Story of Redemption. It's a series of short films, 6-7 minutes long each, with discussion questions. We have evangelism, discipleship tracks, and we have subtitles in about 20 different languages, some of them in voiceover. And so going around the world, but we found that there are some universal things. Every church, every mission effort needs a way to share the gospel and a way to do it in a way that resonates with people today. So the biblical story is powerful, and we're able to, with technology, really take a resource and make it something that resonates across a lot of different people groups. So this is one of these resources and tools that we can, you know, help provide. But if I can, let me share with you the trailer for this film series. It'll kind of take you around the world in a lot of places, and then talk about how we can use all of this to involve people in the mission, to blend overseas and local missions, and also things that are going to touch, inspire people to be a part of this financially, involvement-wise, and hopefully in many different ways.
My name is Nubal Fostarichan. I am from Jerusalem. Today, people are busy, but the only thing they are not busy for is opening their iPhones and watch the videos. And Story of Redemption videos is very effective. The message is from the Bible and speaks about places that we would love to see.
I'm Charles Franklin, born and brought up at Bangalore, India. With regards to the Story of Redemption, it's an amazing piece of work. Story of Redemption gives a platform to ask people the most interesting questions that have ever been asked. Also, the videos portray the real places where Christ himself visited. So we get to see places that really exist in the Bible, and we get to know that Bible is real.
My name is Basil Chong. I'm from Singapore. What I really like about the Story of Redemption series, you can watch it on your phone. There's a whole generation of people who are fluent in their mother tongue, whether that's Malay or Chinese. It just makes it so much more accessible.
Hello, my name is Sandra Milagros Torres-Novamani. I'm from Lima, Peru. The Story of Redemption, it was quite amazing. Last night we had a youth gathering and I loved it. We were all able to get encouraged to preach and teach about Jesus.
My name is Joel Jure. I come from Kenya. I work in Made Industries. I also work with the Kamuli Church. Today we had various churches coming to the Story of the Redemption seminar. The churches were very excited about the material. If you look at the youth and the teens nowadays, they are what we say digital. And I think the videos are neat. We have reached out to 160 churches. I think it's exciting.
I'm Matt Gully, living in Athens, Greece, working together with Hellenic Ministries. We believe this is the greatest place in the world to reach Muslims for Christ, because it is a place where the countries are pouring out through Greece into Europe and into the West. And while they're here, they're open to new things. They're open to the gospel. And so we're excited about the Story of Redemption as it is a tool to put into their hands. Currently have 40 to 60 conversations a week. They're asking about the Trinity, and they're asking about the divinity of Jesus, and they're asking good questions.
Hello, everybody. My name is Yura Lazar, and I'm executive director of Croatia for Christ Ministry. We started to broadcast our biblical messages on local TV stations. We're using the story of redemption, James Norrid's ministry.
This week we had a Story of Redemption camp. We had about 45 non-Christians come to this camp, and I believe they came not only just to learn English and speak it, but also to learn more about God.
Hey, this is Craig and Leslie Altrott.
Both of us work for Let's Start Talking, and we are so excited to partner with the Story of Redemption.
Well, we love the Story of Redemption films. They are a great way for people to just be introduced to God and to Christ.
We are very happy and grateful for the next generation for Christ Ministry to let us use their film series. And after a little more than a year of our broadcasting, we are receiving a lot of calls all over Croatia. A person called to our TV show. His name was Andrew. He said that he would like to be baptized in Christ in our church.
Hello, I'm John Reed with the Hilltop Church. James Norrid came and spent the whole day with us talking about evangelism and outreach. And one of the things that James is doing that we really like is the story of redemption. I grew up with something in our brotherhood called the Jewel Miller film strips. In their time, they were fantastic and very effective, but they really don't apply as much anymore. And so what James has done, if you've seen his videos, is he makes it very real, very authentic, and very accepting for people who don't have a Christian background, who maybe haven't been in church in a long time. And he uses narrative as a way of engaging people, the narrative, the story of Jesus Christ.
Hi, my name is Arina. I come from Samara, Russia. The story of redemption touched my heart. I learned that crucified of Jesus is the most important thing, and he saved us, all people around the world. He made our lives wonderful, and he gave us eternal life.
Kaylee, what's your job?
Tell people about Jesus.
To tell people about Jesus. That's right.
Okay, so
James, I'm going to interrupt right there as you're closing that down. I just want to remind people that there's going to be a follow-up email that comes tomorrow evening, and there'll be a link to those that film series that you've got, which I've viewed, and it's just stunning not photography, but video, at high quality stuff. And so there'll be a link to that, as well as other resources like the book, The Missional Church, that you referred to. There'll be links to those in the follow-up email tomorrow.
great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tim. Let me show you an example. So, and just how this strategy works. So, for instance, one of the churches we work with is the church in Moscow, and they are a church that helps support an outreach, a camp in Samar, Russia, which has been sharing the gospel and has been doing a great work. Ilya Rivkin is a young guy, and he's our representative there, and he's got a fantastic story all on his own, but we started going through using the Russian story of redemption there, and God really has blessed that. We had 5 baptisms last year, 4 this year, and a lot of work all throughout the years with God working through this young man. But he's taken a group from Moscow down to Samar, that's where he grew up, to do this retreat. Now, in some parallels ways, it's like a church in the U.S. that's sending money overseas and maybe having some effective overseas, but they're not doing anything locally. Well, we wanted them to be on mission, the Moscow church themselves. And so you find some key people like that who have this missional gifting, missionary heart, and they can really help get the whole church moving in a direction. With that, it's him. So we did a mission strategy retreat with the Moscow church, and one of the gaps that we found in their Seek, Serve, Share, one, they had a gap in the share, didn't have tools for doing that. So, but by going through the film series in that camp in Samar, that provided training for a number of the leaders in that church because they participated in that camp. So they got trained in that, but they also had kind of a missing part of that serve. One of the ways you serve people is kind of connect them relationally and give them community. And and that's a missing piece in the U.S., by the way, too. We need entry points for people. Sometimes we want to jump from, like, we've never talked and we've never spoken, but, do you want to marry me? I mean, that's basically the jump that we're going with people. So we need some, events to invite people into that's where they can see that we're not weird people. One analogy I use is like, if your Muslim neighbor was going to try to convert you, what if he said, talked to you the first time and said, hey, why don't you come over to our house on Friday night, to our basement with 12 guys, and we're going to have an in-depth study of the Quran. I mean, that sounds a little bit scary to people who don't know anything about that culture. Well, it's the same with a lot of people who are, not inclined towards Christianity. So you need events to invite people into, barbecues, etc. Well, they came up with about 12 events, things that they could do each month to invite people into, and they were contextualized for them. They came up with like a city tour where they'd go walking and invite people to go and do that. Another night that they had was like an Indian food night. One of the members from India, they invited people, stuff I never would have come up with, but with good coaching questions. And see, these are the types of things, if you're on a missions committee or whatever, you can break down the seek, serve, share and ask people, how they see that part of the strategy can fit into what they're doing. And so they started having people show up to those. They adopted kind of another part of that serve, an autistic center, started studying with people in that, they're trained in that, and started seeing people come to faith and people being baptized into Christ. Praise God. Well, all it takes is when you start getting that ball rolling, when people start seeing God at work in something, they see people coming to faith, then that's something to celebrate, and it just gets everyone so much further on board. And that can occur both locally as well as overseas. So I didn't grow up in Moscow, obviously, but these are Jesus principles, and they tend to be effective as long as you contextualize them. And so this is something that, again, you can use as a filter or lens for the mission works that you're supporting to try to make them more holistic and more effective. So a common mission strategy and some common tools that you can use across the board. And, when you look at the history of disciple-making movements, I'll just briefly say that if you look at Alan Hirsch's work, The Forgotten Ways, other groups that have done studies of this, they've had common tools. So like in the Restoration movement, apropos to its time, one of the things was the five-finger method. It used to be the six-finger method, but then it became the five-finger method, and we kind of simplified it. But, the hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized. People don't think in steps today. They're much further away. They don't know the biblical story. We have to have a different approach. But we do need a way to share the gospel locally, overseas, all these different kinds of ways. And most people don't know how to do that. And even some missionaries, they're living overseas, they're doing some good sort of stuff, but they may not, really have something that's very replicable that others can do. So let me share some tips and thoughts on involvement in the mission. First of all, preaching and teaching on mission and missions is vitally important. A church is a system. It's a family system. The reality is, if they don't see it up front, if they don't hear it from the leaders, if they don't hear it from, the preaching minister, the elders, all the key people, then they don't think it's real. They'll think it's something you do off in a committee somewhere. So this is vitally important to have preaching and teaching on this, and people respond to this. This is what God calls us to do. We have this mandate, and that will help with it. Second, some training and some common strategy tools for local and overseas missions. Again, what are some things that you can cross-pollinate with? For us, the Story of Redemption is one of those things, but some common things that you can do across the board. Number 3, bi-directional visits and short-term mission trips. So what's bi-directional? What I mean by that is both sending people over to the mission field as well as having people from the mission field come and visit the church, so that you get a face on that ministry. People can connect with them personally, and this will help garner support for missions. Now, short-term missions, some say, it's not worth it. We should just, send it to the people there. They can do it more effectively. It costs so much money. And I understand that thinking, and maybe that's an effective strategy for you. But I'll just tell you my own story. I mean, if I hadn't gone on short-term mission trips, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I grew up going on those mission trips, and that really sparked my heart for missions. And we've done that with our children, and they've gone around the world now, and they have a totally different perspective. So at the very least, it helps garner support for missions and helps people, you know, catch a glimpse of what can be done. Now, a lot of short-term mission trips end up being only service-oriented, and that's an easy entry point for people. It's not that those are bad, but finding ways to actually have your people help share the gospel as well, and not just, you know, build a fence or, you know, paint a house, but how can they be active in helping the missionaries connect with and share the gospel when they are there? That's very important. For personal invitations, most everything that happens in a church, I mean, people's lives are so busy that what the personal invitation, in asking people to be involved, to serve, to go on a trip, whatever it may be, what that says is you're important enough for me, to make this personal ask, to go beyond an email, to where, I mean, and that's powerful. And you as a church leader, we don't understand and oftentimes underestimate how powerful that ask can be from someone that they know and respect, to get involved and be a part of this. So personal invitations are hugely important. I had a young minister take me down to the jail when I was in college to do Bible studies. For whatever reason, he saw something in me, and because of that, I am doing a lot of what I'm doing today. So, and then number 5, pictures, videos, and stories about mission and missions and the impact that the church is having. You know, it used to be, we said, if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one around, did it happen? No one around to hear it, did it happen? Today, the question we could ask is, if something happened and there's not a picture or video of it, did it really happen? And for today's world, and particularly younger generations, the answer is no. I mean, really, and I find that if you don't share back these things with the congregation, pictures, videos, stories, testimonials, I mean, there's often fantastic things that are going on around the world that churches help support, and no one knows about it except for a few people on a missions committee. This has to be shared back out in multiple forms and ways to the congregation. And again, to celebrate what God is doing. And you can take little snippets, a picture, a video, you know, and a short story, and make this a regular part of what you update the congregation on. You know, some of the churches I'm working with, like at the end of each service, they'll have like a little, you know, 30-second to 1-minute mission thought, you know, and sometimes it's drawn from local, sometimes from overseas, but just a reminder about what God calls us to, the impact the church is having. People don't care about a whole bunch of stats most of the time, and maybe if you're deep dive on the committee, but you have to connect with people. Not only the theology, the biblical theology connects with their head, their minds, and that's important. But you also have to connect with their heart. And Jesus said what? Serve God what? With your all of your being. And if you don't connect with people emotionally, you know, there've been studies of people that if you disconnect the emotion center of the brain, people have an inability to make decisions. They can't decide. Our emotions drive us to take action. And so if you want people to be engaged in mission, supportive of it, involved in it, you have to connect with both their head and their heart. And one of the best ways to do that is to tell stories of God at work, of how people are being impacted and lives are being changed. And whatever direction you want to go, start sharing this with your people. So I'm always seeking to tell stories about the impact that ministry is having. You need a kind of a key story for your mission efforts, you know, what you're trying to accomplish. You know, I've got a great story having to do with my children and passing faith on, etc. They're only here for a certain amount of time. Anyway, I could tell that story, but for time's sake, I won't. But and then you know, a key verse or passage that goes along with that. For us, we've got, I'll try to bring it up here, but Psalm 78, which says, "We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, His power, the wonders that He has done. He commanded our ancestors to teach their children so the next generation would know them even the children yet to be born, and they would in turn tell their children. So you need a key story, a key summary of what it is that you're trying to do as a church, and then to share that with people, and then with the different works that you are supporting, to illustrate what God is doing around the world. So, for instance, let me try to bring this up. Western, Central, East, Southeastern Europe. I was just on a trip to Thessaloniki, Greece. You know, God is opening doors in the Muslim world all around the world. But how do you impact people with that and help them see if that's the people group you're trying to reach? Well, we've gone to Athens. We've got partnership with Hellenic Ministries. They're doing some fantastic work. I was blessed to go to Thessaloniki, spend some time there, and do some studies with some people, some refugees. And there I met a young man named Ali. Ali is from Iran. And there's a Jesus movement going on in Iran. In fact, here in the DC area, probably the last few years, we've had maybe about 10 former Muslims who are baptized into Christ. I noticed that like 9 of those 10 were from Iran. And sure enough, some of the stats that come out, you know, one of the fastest places where Christianity is growing the fastest is in Iran. Well, you can hear that as a stat, but you know, what's people's image of, you know, Muslims or people from Iran? It's probably whatever's in the news. I met this young man there named Ali, and Ali was one who tried to come into Greece from Iran 6 different times. He had to travel a month in order to get into the country, and each time he got turned away, he nearly froze to death, nearly starved to death. The water in his backpack all froze. He finally got someone to take him across the border by a boat, and so he came into the country. And he's one of thousands that have come in. In 2011, there were some 10,000 refugees that came into Greece. And by 2013, there were over 1 million. 1 million, incredible. And this has been difficult for the Greek people because of the economic crisis that was going on at the time. But evangelistically, it's been fantastic because they've met people, churches that have served, they've been holistic in that seek, serve, share. But I'm sitting down and studying with Ali and watching the film series with Farsi subtitles, and it was a video on God's grace. And I asked him, where do you see God's grace in your life? And he talked about how he's grateful to be alive, what he had lived under Iran. Everything was watched. It's so oppressive, the freedom that he had. And then he were sitting down across the table, and he gripped the table and he said, I have a table. He pointed to his cup. He said, I have food and drink. He said, I have friends. He said, it is enough. It is enough. We are blessed with so much. We take so much for granted. But when you hear from a young man like Ali, the impact that the gospel has had on his life. And he said, you know, I'm not yet a Christian yet, but I am going to be. And you see the impact of blessing people, serving people, and how people are coming to faith in Jesus Christ. That is incredibly powerful. Now, if you don't tell a story like this, if you don't put a picture or something around this, then it'll just be another busy thing that people are too busy to note or to hear and to participate in their lives. So telling stories, letting people see the impact that God is having on people's lives, all of this is vitally important to building up greater support for missions. I'll tell you one here, another instance here that we did with Fairfax, and then kind of have some closing thoughts and a lot of time for questions. So one of the places that we went as a family a couple of years ago was to Croatia. And Croatia is a beautiful country. It's former Yugoslavia. A lot of Americans haven't known about it, but now all kinds of stuff are being done there, a lot of filming and all this kind of stuff. So people are more familiar with it. But I went there because I had bless their talking directors, say, you know, James, this is a great place to go. They're doing some church planting. They're working well together, healthy theologically. And it's a great place to go for your family. Well, guess what? I've got a family. I want a great place for them to go. And I had to get their buy-in, right? So we went there, and God opened a tremendous door there. In fact, it ended up being one of the most fruitful ministries. But when we started out, it was a little bit challenging. So we showed up in Croatia, and the director of this ministry, Croatia for Christ, couldn't be there, but he sent someone to pick us up. They got us at the airport. There was they had our picture, and you know, he'd let us know beforehand who would be coming, and so we get in the van and we're going, and we find out that they aren't members of the church, and they're people that the church is reaching out to, and the whole church is like at an outreach at the coast. And anyway, so my wife, who did not grow up going on mission trips, said, she turns to me, she said, they aren't members of the church? And I said, no, but you know, it's okay. And so we go to the church building, and where we're going to stay, and there's no room at the inn. There's a big group that's come in. We've got to find a place to stay for 10 days. Everything's filled up, so we find this bed and breakfast. It has a kind of a common area, and there's some interesting looking people in there. They want all the money up front, and I'm going to 6 different countries. I don't have $10,000 in cash, so I hand over my passport, which is common in Europe. But my wife is at this point like, what in the world is going on? The girls haven't eaten. It's very stressful, and so I could tell she's upset. And I said, honey, how can I help? And she said, first of all, she said, no part of this is okay. And then she said, I said, what can I do? She said, fix this now. And so I did our best to try to fix it. Well, it ended up that God opened a great door there. They ended up broadcasting our series. I mean, just all this incredible stuff that happened, things we couldn't have planned. Well, from this, and later we reflected on that trip, at the end of that trip, and asked, you know, where do we see God most at work? And you know, said Croatia. We had to depend upon God. We had to get outside of our comfort zone. My wife, after this, just kind of, you know, the next day I had to go do some things. She kind of, you know, we're going to figure this town out. And it ended up being a great experience. And we began sharing about Croatia, and we took this past summer a group of about 25 from Fairfax, Virginia, to the Croatian coast, to a beautiful place, to share the gospel, go through the Story of Redemption film series with the English learning version of that series that we have. And we went through with about 40 seekers or so. At the end of the camp, they were all just so open. Many said it was the best week of their life. And 30 of them came to the worship service at the end, etc. So God really blessed it. But here's the thing. If you don't share this back to the church, those that went will be impacted. The missions committee is great, but you have to share this back. So we are visiting with us at the end of September, Yura Lazar. He's the director of one of the ministries there. And rather than just shuffling off to a committee, we're going to use that to generate interest in mission, to meet him, to meet someone from this country. We'll have a meet and greet. We'll share a video from things that happened there, have the different team members that went to share a little bit about their experience. And so use this to generate interest for when he comes. And guess what? If we're going to have anyone to show up with that, we're going to have to personally invite people to come. Could you come? Could you ask key people? Could you invite your small group? Work through your existing systems and do things that generate interest to where people have you know, a heart for or interest in this, and can then get on board and be a part of it. And guess what? Because we have some common tools, we now have 23 people that went and spent a whole week sharing the gospel, learn to have faith conversations, and that English learning version, we can use just a regular version here, but we can also use the English learning version to reach out to all these different people groups that are here in the DC area. So we've had a group of 23 people that have had a whole week in practice of sharing faith. That's fantastic. It's hard to get people's attention here for an hour, let alone a day or a week. But because of the interest in overseas missions, which a lot of people, and going to amazing places around the world, which a lot of younger people have, by the way, too. I mean, we've got young adults that just, they love to go to places like this. It helps them capture their heart and interest for missions. And then when they come back, inviting them in to continue that now. We kind of build that expectation on the front end. Hey, we want to train you and you're going to go and do some amazing work, but we want you to do that when you come back. And guess what's going to happen? Those people who went are going to be great advocates for particularly Croatia, but hopefully missions in general. But this is tremendously important. This is how it impacted me, my life, family, my life, etc. But these stories have to be shared back to the congregation. So, you know, with all the works and things that we're doing, again, we want to let people know what God's doing, find some ways to share that back, and have some common strategies and tools that people can use in different ways. So when it comes to funding, kind of the last thing here, first of all, if you do all of the above, that's going to help with financing all of this. I mean, look, it's hard to get people to give the things that they don't know anything about, that they've barely heard of. But when they know about it, hear about it, put a face on it, a name on it, a strategy that is biblical, makes sense. And when they hear how God is at work, well, guess what? That's something that people want to be a part of in a lot of different ways. You can also make personal asks for funding. Obviously, a lot of nonprofits work through personal ask. You know, you don't have to go through a committee other than the committee of your family and talking to your wife. So, you know, so that's great. There are going to be people that can just jump on board. And so whether it's short term or other things, you can always, you know, add this as in addition to your regular church budget, and, you know, find key people that you can ask to help fund special things. Other special giving days. You know, one of the things that we did, one church we was serving at, there was about 100,000 weekly budget, our yearly budget for mission special offering. We told people, hey, whatever we're doing overseas, and there was a lot of good overseas work, we're also going to do here locally. That engaged a whole other group of people who wanted to be a part of it, and our giving for that almost overnight went from 100,000 to well over 200,000, because it engaged a different set of people. And so this blending of local and overseas is something that really can be effective in getting people involved and having a heart for this. And then your regular budget, you can also tie this to local and faith formation as well. So one of the things, for instance, is a great selling point for missions, going on missions overseas, is this will be tremendously helpful for your family, and it will help their faith. And most, in working with, you know, younger generations, millennials, a common thing that we find is a lot of those that do, younger people, young adults who have a strong faith, many of them have had a cross-cultural mission experience. As one young woman said, she said, when I went overseas and I saw that people actually had to make a choice here and they had this strong faith, I saw that Christianity wasn't just an American thing, but that it was a God thing. And I'm telling you, my children's faith is so much stronger because they've gone on these trips and they've been a part of it, and they're going to be huge advocates for missions, local and overseas, wherever they go, because they've been a part of that. And so regular funding, obviously, for the long-term missionaries is hugely important, but also getting people involved in some different ways where they can taste, touch, and feel what God is doing around the world can really help gain that support and involvement and financing for missions.
So I love the simple filter that you've got, the seek, serve, share, and really challenge your mission partners that you have, to challenge them, which place are they strong and weak in, and that to be doing over there. But that then begs the question, which of those am I doing strongly or weakly here? So that's a great simple filter that I think any church could use for how they're doing as a church. So that's some great stuff. We want to again thank our ministry partner, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, for our webinar series. But I want to just tell the folks about the upcoming events that we've got at Waypoint. One of them is an elder event coming up at the end of October. They're one-day training events for your elders and future elders. And your church is only as strong as your leadership. And so this is a great event that we're hosting with the guys from E2 Effective Elders. And so you can go to our website to register for that. But then our next two webinars that we've got coming up next month, our webinar is about mental health and the church. And the church for too long has not talked about, not addressed mental health issues in your church. And if you don't believe they're in your church, you're naive, number one. And even this week with the announcement of the very prominent pastor who committed suicide, who was a mental health advocate, reminds us that we've got to have conversations about mental health issues and what the church can do about them. So we've got a great ministry that's going to be talking about how to do that well in your church. And then in November, we'll have one for prayer teams and how your prayer team can advocate to better welcome God into your worship services in particular. Your Sunday morning worship experience, how do you strategically and intentionally invite God to be a part of that? So that's for your prayer teams to be a part of. So we hope that you would join those webinars or the elder event, and more than that, that you would invite the people at your church that would also want to come to those. A personal invitation, like he said, is probably the strongest way to get people to come. And so if you would personally invite them to the elder events or to these next couple of webinars, there's a great chance that they'll join us. So we hope we'll see you at one of those events. We're glad that you've joined us tonight, and there will be a follow-up email here coming up tomorrow with a lot of links to what was shared tonight. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you next month.